and this is a story where people are seldom in great visceral danger,
Mhm.
that does happen, but so the suspense really, what I was shooting for was coming from the conflict in the family, conflict in the two communities who are seeing
Mhm.
what's occurring from two different perspectives.
Welcome to Book Reporter Talks To, where our latest guest is one of our Book Reporter favorite authors, William Kent Krueger. And we're going to be talking about his latest book, Lightning Strike, which is a prequel to the 17-book Cork O'Connor series. Kristen Hanna shares a really great quote about the book that I'm going to read. William Kent Krueger is a master storyteller at the top of his game with Lightning Strike, a pitch perfect, richly imagined story that is both edge of your seat thriller and evocative, emotionally charged coming of age tale that explores the complex bonds between fathers and sons and the long simmering animosities of the past. This is a beautifully written novel that packs a powerful punch, and I loved it. And I so agree with Kristen. I don't think I could have said it any better. So welcome, Kent. So nice to see you again. I just wish we were in person.
Oh, one of these days when we understand what the new normal is, we'll make that happen, Carol. It's so good to see you again. It's always good to talk with you.
I am so looking forward to this because let's start with the obvious. You're 17 books into the Cork O'Connor series. So why now a prequel?
It was time to do something different. Honestly, I really did this at the encouragement and urging of my agent, Danielle Egan Miller, who has wanted to see a prequel for a good long while. An opportunity she kept pitching to me to explore the deep background of Cork O'Connor, and all those important relationships that helped shape him into the man who occupies center stage in this series. I often, across the course of the series, have made references to things in the past and people in the past. This was my opportunity to elaborate on all of that.
Sew it all together and sew it all together. I really feel like you loved writing the book. It gave you the opportunity to talk about this beloved character, but with a more seasoned eye than you would have had if you hadn't written those 17 books. Did you draw notes of how you would have seen young Cork like through all those books? Because you've dropped little acorns about him along the way, or did he come to you fully formed when you thought of young Cork?
The acorns dropped along the way. They were just sort of, you know, they were little gems that I planted without really knowing the final creation that they were going to be a part of. But when I began to write this story, I saw Cork right from the get-go. And I gotta tell you, I think honestly, he was a lot like me when I was his age. You know,
Just wondering that.
you know, so for readers out there who might be familiar with my work, including the standalones, both Ordinary Grace and This Tender Land are told by essentially 12 or 13-year-old narrators. And we pick up Cork here in Lightning Strike at the age of 12. I have no trouble at all capturing the voice, the mentality of a 12-year-old, because I honestly believe that men never mature much beyond 12 or 13 years of age. So I had no trouble at all capturing Cork O'Connor, seeing him clearly, understanding who he was, and the fears that he has as he starts to see the world around him change dramatically in a lightning strike. And so oh gosh, I got to tell you, I just had a ball writing this story.
Oh, it comes through. It absolutely comes through. And you're coming off the success of This Tender Land and Ordinary Grace, both would have these young protagonists. And you definitely nail these coming of age characters. And you just love writing them because they sound a lot like, little 12-year-old or 13-year-old you. But man, you've got those voices nailed. And I was hearing the other ones thinking how they would be chatting with Cork along the way as well. Definitely the nuances,
Yeah,
of being that age.
I got to tell you this. All of the early literature that influenced me greatly were adventure stories.
Mhm.
H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, Arthur Conan Doyle, Jack London, Robert Louis Stevenson, and so there's always been adventure threads in my stories. This one was particularly strong, and dealt particularly with that age group. So I'm hoping that I really capture that adolescent audience as well as the broader audience that typically will come to my Cork O'Connor series.
Well, the other thing too is we've got a river again too, figuring well into this. And I think that that's something that we touched on in this tender land, but here we go in a little bit more about what the river and what the river means and what the river means to different people. And I think that that's really interesting as well. We're also talking about Cork and his dad, and it's a relationship that's explored in depth in later books in different ways. Different little nuggets are passed along the way. But I feel like you really loved writing about them. And what worked about that for you, writing about that father-son relationship where there's not always just a warm familial relationship, there's some tension built in between them as well.
I think that that's pretty much the way every father-son relationship is, even the best relationships, because fathers have particular duties that they feel responsible for in terms of helping their sons to grow into responsible men, um, and showing them the way when I've been there before, showing them the way when you're a father is like, you're stumbling in the dark. You continue to stumble in the dark. So sometimes it's a little bit of the blind leading the blind. And as a parent, you're not always sure that
Mhm.
you're taking your children in the right way. And particularly as a son, particularly as an adolescent son, you're beginning to question your father's judgments a little bit more than you ever did in the past. And so that definitely is going to cause conflict.
Especially since you've come on a crime. You've come upon a crime at the very beginning and you have your own thoughts about what this is. It's a beloved person to you. And how is your dad going to explore this particular circumstance? Because it means so much to you at the same time.
And Cork O'Connor and his father come from different backgrounds, really.
Mhm.
His father is an Irish cop out of Chicago, and Cork is a kid of mixed heritage, and a large part of his heritage is Ojibwe, and so he belongs to in two different worlds, but he understands them both. And his father is struggling understanding that Ojibwe background, that Ojibwe heritage, the Ojibwe way of seeing the world and the thinking about everything that's fundamental, justice in particular, because that's central to who Liam O'Connor, Cork's father, is trying to deliver justice to the people of Tamarack County, both white and native.
Mhm. And I think Cork is really questioning his mixed background for the first time. He's known who he is, but I feel like he's questioning now, like, how do people look at him? And he's in an age where the child starts to think more about life beyond what they've been told, beyond what they've learned at home, heard in the classroom. And they start to have more original thoughts. And I feel like he's at this moment where he's questioning, I'm this mixed race heritage, but where do I lie? Like, where do I feel, especially with this case that's being solved at the same time? Which world am I walking in?
Yeah, we're beginning to see him. You're absolutely right. For the first time, he's becoming aware that there are those in the community who think of him and speak of him in a different way, a way that he's never really been aware of. And he has to begin to consider, okay, who am I within this community? Who am I within my family? And who am I just in terms of the great mystery, what the Creator has set before me? Where is my unique path? And
Mhm.
it's not necessarily my father's path. It's not necessarily the path of my Ojibwe ancestors. Who am I and where am I supposed to go? Who am I supposed to become? That's really important in Cork's thinking across the course of this novel.
And there are times where he's doing things he's not supposed to do. He's times where he's places he's not supposed to be, because I think it's that part of coming to know who he is. He's constantly pushing himself in these different directions, which his father doesn't completely approve of, his mother doesn't completely approve of, but he's getting that questioning. And it really goes back to let the audience know there's a murder at the beginning, or there's a death at the beginning. There's a death at the beginning. And in that death, we're trying to figure out, is it a murder? Is it a suicide? What ended up happening to this person? And as a result, he's questioning what happened to this person. How well did he know this person? And I think from there, he's questioning to how much does he know of all people just because of this one man.
Yeah, he does find himself in places he's not supposed to be, doing things that he's not supposed to be doing. But what adolescent doesn't find him or herself in that situation? So he's pretty normal in that regard. The difficulty of Cork is the fact, again, of that mixture in his heritage, which complicates his thinking tremendously.
Mhm. It's like, who does this? Who did this to whom? And which world did they walk in? Was it somebody from that world, this world? How did those people intersect? And there are so many nuggets across along the way of what could have happened. And I think that he's trying to explore each of those, because each of those lend a little window inside to him. Because if it was this, it meant that. And if it was that, it meant this. And that's what I was seeing as I was reading.
Oh, good. You caught all the nuances, just as any astute reader should. Thank you, Carol.
I'm in there deep. I'm in there deep. Well, I'm not as up to Native American history as I should be. And when I was reading that the Native Families Relocation Act of 1956 happened just 7 years before the start of this book. And you write enough to get a new reader up to speed on this without drowning us in facts. But is there a book or something you recommend our reading if we really want to get a handle on this? Because when I realized 56 was only 7 years before, that's not that long ago.
Yeah, for Cork O'Connor, it's fairly recent history. There are a number of resources out there. I don't have them on my website, but Carol, thank you. I should add those to my website. I had to do research in, talking with my Native friends who, in fact, their families were affected by the Relocation Act. I don't know how many people out there know anything about. Here's the Relocation Act. It was passed by Congress, and what it did was offer Native families the opportunity to relocate into, generally speaking, urban areas where there were promised jobs and housing. That didn't materialize for the vast majority of them. And in the Native community, it really is seen as simply another attempt by the white majority to divide the Native communities, split them up, acculturate them, if you will. In fact, whole Native communities disappeared as a result of this. And it caused an enormous amount of conflict within the Native communities because there were those who went and those who stayed behind. And some of those who went, when they came back, were not welcomed back because it was felt like they deserted the culture, they deserted the community. So it was another tragic episode in the way in which we have dealt with our Native brothers and sisters.
I had just read the weekend before Clark and Division, Naomi Hirahara's new book, where she talks about, I personally thought that everyone who was interred in a Japanese camp didn't come out till after the war. And she talks about migrating these people to Chicago and what ended up happening. And, we talk so much about what happened in Europe during the war. And then we hear like this story happened. And then we hear this story happened in 1956. And he's actually Cork is talking about his friends going to these other places and coming back and saying, we went to California, we went to here, but we'd much rather be staying where we are right now. And it was just heartbreaking in a lot of ways to see the way, we're going to relocate you and this is what's going to happen. It's going to work. It's going to be great.
Yet another series of promises not kept.
Exactly. And, it's the Native American boarding schools. I know we learned a lot about in this tender land, and they're the blemish. How many of those were there? How many of those schools were there? Because we touch upon that again here. Were there hundreds or were there?
Yeah, at the height of the Native American boarding school experience, there were more than 360 Native American boarding schools across the country, operated by the government, operated by private institutions, operated by religious organizations at the height of it. And then it began to dwindle off. But, most of my friends in the Native community are my age or younger, so they didn't go through this experience. It had ended by the time they came along, but their parents went through it, or their aunties and uncles did, or the grandparents did. And to talk to them about the continuing trauma from that horrific experience is sad and enlightening.
Yeah. And I think that the more that we hear about these stories, the more we hear about what's happening, it's a chance to not repeat it. It's not a chance to not repeat what had happened before. Exactly. I think that blame is a very big thread in this book. Who's to blame for the reservations, the Native American schools, and the way people look at each other. And you constructed these topics, leaving them open for lots of discussion. And I see this being great fodder for book clubs to do more research, but also to have taken the character of Cork and his friends, who once again, like the kids in this tender land, are on the boat going on their little journey to figure out, they're still the best pals investigating what's happening. And to see it through the children's eyes, of to hear this whole story and then talk about it. Am I off kilter?
No, it's important that you see it through the eyes of those who are not world weary.
Mhm.
And the the um, the young characters in this story, Cork and his friends, are more than willing to embrace some of the otherworldly experiences that they witness, and they have no explanation for, but certainly Cork's father has a logical explanation for. And so I like the idea that here are kids whose hearts are still wide open, whose eyes are, wide in wonder, and and then slowly they too have to see the reality of the world and the terrible things that the world has to, unfortunately, has to offer them.
Mhm. At the same time, though, they are having fun. And you hit on a lot of period details of 1963, where the story is set. I personally love the times where they all told their parents they were someplace else, but they were really in the third place. And I like the lots of research down memory lane, including Kool-Aid. I have not thought about Kool-Aid in a very long time.
Come on, Carol, didn't you grow up with Kool-Aid? That was
Totally,
sort of
but
my generation.
I haven't thought about it in a really long time. That sugary sweet. I really think that
Absolutely.
Kool-Aid frozen is popsicles. I really think it's the same thing.
Sure it is.
All these details, I mean, you have so many really fun ones laid in there. Was it research or just memory? Because was it just, this is what I did, or like looking through, I always think that looking through old magazines to say, what actually happened then? What were they eating?
Yeah, the vast majority of it is simply memory, but then I had to do the research to make sure, any movies that I referenced, any songs that I referenced, the magazines that I referenced were in fact in existence at that point in time. Because, all of your memory gets blurred. You're not sure exactly when things took place. So I had to do the research to make sure that nothing was anachronistic in there. Yeah.
I remember Fresca coming out, the Fresca commercials during a snowstorm when I was little. And I just have to pinpoint the age because that was Fresca's arriving on the scene. And I was like, may Fresca please be gone. You know what I mean? Please, may it just be gone. But it was fun to see all those little references of what people were eating, what people were doing. Even the fact that like they were going to have a big church supper and they were going to bring what she was going to bring as the dish and what she was going to do. It brought back memories, but by the same tokens also sets the tone. What people are eating is the same as what they're doing and how they're sharing family meals. Like there's no takeout happening. You know?
Take out, what was that? When I was a kid, pizza, what was that?
Pizza, yeah, delivered maybe.
And Cork in his conversation with his friend who goes out to California, tacos, what are those?
I love those little things because it is when we used to travel to places when we were little, those foods were completely different from anything that you would have ever had. And you're like, look at this, what these people are eating. It looks really fun, but get me the hamburger.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not that so interesting. There's a lot of anger and mistrust that runs through the people. Were you trying to balance that as you were doing the storytelling as well? Because everybody, like there are moments where his grandmother is very, very upset with his father, but she feels he should be fighting for the people on the reservation. And this is what's going on. And this is what you need to understand. There's a lot of walking out of the room, just not understanding, but you're seeing it through a child's eyes, which is completely different from an adult looking at the situation and with that more understanding. Is that something you were going for there?
Yeah, conflict, of course, because it's conflict that drives every story. And and this is a story where people are seldom in great visceral danger.
Mhm.
That does happen, but so the suspense really, what I was shooting for was coming from the conflict in the family, conflict in the two communities who are seeing
Mhm.
what's occurring from two different perspectives.
Mhm.
As Cork is watching this, his great fear is that his family, his community is coming apart. And what a terrible fear to have as a child, but that's how he sees the possibility.
Mhm. And he's also learning about something called infidelity. And it was he's finding I love when he finds the piece of paper that smells like perfume. And that is his clue to go sit there and say, what perfume? That's Shalimar. Okay, let me go find. And his mother is not wearing Shalimar. I mean, there were references to perfume in a few different places of perfumes that people know, like they're the kind of like iconic ones. And that's how he's solving parts of the case, is like, I could smell that perfume and so is wearing it as well. I love that.
Well, these days, fragrances, not a lot of people indulge in fragrances because there are folks out there who are allergic to it. But when I was growing up, all women smelled one way or another. They all smelled wonderful.
Exactly. And it's go out and get the gift for your mother. I like
It
you're
was
going
always
to go.
the go-to gift.
Because I remember one time we went, and for my father, we bought aftershave. We brought about 8 bottles of all different kinds. And I swear he had to like ask for the receipt and go back the next day. But it was really funny because my sister ran in the store and goes, look at all the different kinds Dad could wear. And it just sparked that when he was sitting there talking about Jean Natte and Shalimar, But at the same time, there's so many beautiful lines and paragraphs that I went back to read this morning. I did a lot of folding down over the weekend. And one towards the end is where Sam is sharing something Liam, Cork's dad, said to him. It seems to me that more and more we don't choose our lives choose us. I am grateful that this life has chosen me. And I think that's such a big line for Liam to have said at a point where it's going to be pivotal for Cork to hear that later on and to hear what's going on. Do you write those beautiful sentences at the beginning, or are those something you go back after you say, so-and-so needs to say such and such, and then fill in what it is?
No, I knew that Sam was going to need to give Cork some wisdom after the terrible things that happened. What exactly that wisdom was going to be, I didn't know until I actually got to the scene and wrote that. Carol, every storyteller is going to tell you this. When we're imagining something, we're really deeply into it, I think we go to a place that's below conscious thought. And I think we touch something that's universal. And when we come back up, we bring that universal and somehow we bring the words with us to convey the beauty and the universality of what we've touched down there. And that's the only explanation I have for something like that.
It was funny. Last week I was talking to Cheller Jenkins Reid about Malibu Rising, and I quoted this one really big passage that meant a lot to me. And she says, okay, I'll be honest with you. I had nothing there. And I went and took a shower, and it came to me, and I wrote it on the shower door. And then I had to go in and take a picture of what was on the shower door before it disappeared, because that was where the line came. It doesn't always come when you're just sitting there. Sometimes and we were talking a lot with authors the last couple of weeks about using their phone to send a note to themselves in draft and what people do. Are you always seated at your desk, or do you have these little scraps of paper you pull out of your pockets later and go, that was it?
No, when I'm biking or when I'm working out and something comes to me, I work really hard. Okay, go over it again, go over it again, go over it again to set it in my mind. 9 times out of 10, that works. But there's that 10th time when I sit down and go, oh, crap. What was that beautiful thing I thought?
Okay, secret. Tell a phone, send a draft to yourself. It's just put it in drafts. And people always joke with me, like, you do a newsletter every Friday night. And I was like, well, I don't exactly write it on Thursday night. I send myself notes all week of remember this, because by the end of the week, I either have to look at Instagram and see what I did, or I have to sit there because my calendar is not going to have these things on it. They're these random things. So notes on there, because if not, you're going to come home that 10th time and go, what was I thinking? Let me go back on that trail.
I'm going to try to remember this phone message to myself thing. We'll see how it works. I'll get
text
back.
Text yourself, what I mean? Yeah. Just text your wife and say, remind me later. And it's not about getting bread, this is like this. So this book is a new great gateway for those who've never read Cork O'Connor before, never done this. And from there, they can move right on to the series. And the lucky thing is there's 17 books to enjoy. In fact, when I posted a picture that I was reading this yesterday, somebody said they'd read 1 through 17 last summer, and they were really looking forward to reading this book. But it's a gateway in at the same time. Will people go from here right into Iron Lake, which is book 1 in the series? Is that a natural progression?
Well, that's certainly my hope, because the first 17 books in this series span 15 years in the lives of the characters involved. So if readers enjoy Lightning Strike, I recommend that they start with Iron Lake and read through in order, because it's just a much richer experience watching all of the growth and the change in the O'Connor clan and all of the people around them across the course of those 15 years.
Yeah, because things are going to happen for everybody in that family as time goes on. You just got the setup here. And the prologue you've got is dated 1989. And I went back and actually looked at that this morning, because the book's set in 63, we're up in 89, and includes a detail with the frozen clock face on the courthouse tower. When did you write the prologue? After the book was done, did you go back and do that? Or was that your setup from the beginning of, that's where we're going to, sort of like the crescendo moment of the other book?
I wrote that section basically last. I began the book with the discovery of the body, and knowing that I'm going to have to provide context. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do that, and then I went back and I wrote the prologue, and then I had to check on all of the all of the details of the prologue, which I wrote those details a quarter of a century ago, and
Right.
had to go back and make sure that everything was correct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. And if you read the book, go back and read the prologue at the end, because I've been saying this a lot with books for people, because you read it at the beginning, you're like, well, what is the meaning of this? And it's so much meaning when you sit there and pick it up at the end, you're like, oh, that's what he was talking about. So Cork, we're going to find out a lot of things about him in this book, little details that like later on are just going to be little nuggets. But here you're like, oh, here's this guy and here's why. I also love that as soon as he sees this crime at the beginning, he immediately sits there, or he sees his body at the beginning. He immediately starts, just like his dad, trying to figure out what went on. And he doesn't trust any piece of evidence that's coming in front of him. It's a constant re-questioning based on who this person is. And I liked, it's like the making of young detective, like right there. It's based on his dinner conversation every night. I love seeing that. Was that fun creating him like that way?
Sure. His father really has shaped him as an investigator in so many ways. And you see the advice that his father offers him as a seasoned investigator. And that's advice that Cork is going to follow essentially the whole of his life. And much of it he follows as he's trying in his own way to come to the solve the mystery, the mysteries at the heart of the story. His father has to legally follow one track. Cork, who's not bound by legalities at this point, can follow an entirely different track.
And he can go ask different questions, because if his father asks that question, it will be looked at one way. If he goes and asks the question, it's the innocence. It's a childhood innocent coming and doing that. Just as when he's going to collect money on his paper route, which I love. Some people have it, some people don't. And he likes to hear the stories of what these people are concocting around it. And then he has to figure out how to get what he wants. So I think even that underlying story on the paper route has, this kid is constantly trying to figure out the way of the world, but also let's go question. In a way, his father, if he went out and asked those same questions, it'd be, oh, wait, why are you here?
Yeah, I have to tell you this, Carol. Early on, I said Cork is a lot like I was when I was his age. Cork's a Boy Scout. I was a Boy Scout. Cork has a paper route. I actually had 3 paper routes when I was a kid. And collecting from the deadbeats was one of the hardest parts of it, of being a paper boy.
And I also think that you remind us there was a morning and afternoon paper for a very long time.
Back in the day.
That's how you got the news. If you weren't watching Walter Cronkite later on in the evening, that was beginning and the end of the day news. Now it's just 24/7. Now that's all we have to do. So I think that the title being Lightning Strike, it's there for one reason, but is it there for another? Because I absolutely think it's a perfect title for this book. It's like the lightning strike that happens in his life where he's in his awakening as well. So was it always the title?
It was always the title, and there was always that double meaning. It's a specific place, as all my titles are in the Cork O'Connor series, and it has another meaning as well.
Yeah, and for those of you who are just starting with this book, you'll remember Iron Lake. You're going to remember so many other things as you go by to read the rest of the series, because the series doesn't have complicated titles. It have titles that are places. Titles are going to just bring you back to where you are and what you're doing. And I think that Lightning Strike it was perfect because it just brought it right in. Let's talk about the cover. I love it. It's stark, it's subtle. And you see this little boy over here on a bicycle delivering his newspapers. So was this always the cover?
A version of that was always the cover. We worked quite a bit on some of the imagery and the coloring itself, the becoming a more subtle mix of the blues. But I think it's a striking cover as well.
Mhm. I think it's really, really strong. And Lightning Strike, the way they did that, and remembering this tender land, really, really loved it. David Chandler does the narration for the audiobook. Did you select him to do that?
No, David has been doing the Cork O'Connor series for recorded books since my audio publisher changed to recorded books, and he has across the years just done a stellar job. And once again, he's nailed it.
Yeah, and for anybody who's watching, there's a sample of it on the homepage of Kent's site. So if you want to just get a snippet of the audiobook and him reading, it's terrific, absolutely great. So what's next? So let's see. It's been like a busy couple of years for you. So what's next?
I am so happy you asked that question. For readers of the series who have followed me through all 17, you remember at the end of the 17th novel, Desolation Mountain, I left our beloved Henry Malou in a rather precarious situation. The novel, I'm just now completing the revisions for it, a novel called Jawbone Creek, scheduled for publication in the fall of 2022. I resolved the issue of what's going to happen with Henry Malou. And I have had a delightful time playing with that question.
So readers, it's like time to get the question answered, but you got to go in between. Like there's something in between that you have to get to next. Right. I love it. I love it. And do you have a thought for what the book is going to be after that? Are you going to leave readers in suspense again and where we're going to go from there?
I don't know what the Cork O'Connor novel. I am contractually obligated to write 2 more Cork O'Connor novels, neither of which I've begun or really even thought of. My energies next will be devoted to another standalone novel that will be a companion to both Ordinary Grace and This Tender Land.
So we'll have young protagonists again? Or we get back to youth?
I'm not even going to tell you what's going on with the next one.
Okay, keep us complete.
I'm still working that one out.
Just everybody know, I tried. I really tried. I tried it. I really tried, and it didn't absolutely work. So, I think that also it's sometimes time and that distance in between. And now you're going to do a lot of talking to people about this book, whether it's virtually, whatever is going to happen over the next couple of weeks, which will take you deep into this book. While you're doing that, talking about Lightning Strike, can you write, or are you just devoted to thinking about the book that you're on, Lightning Strike right now?
Well, even when I'm on tour, I try to write every day, 7 days. I'm not always able to keep that regimen, but that's what I shoot for.
Yeah. Well, remember, notes on the phone, they count. Notes on the phone, you can fit a lot of notes, doing it like that. Well, Kent, look, I am so excited to be sharing this book with our readers. For anybody who hasn't ever read the series, start here, and you're going to see why you want to go further, because immediately you're going to want to sit there and say, get that reserve on Iron Lake right now at your library if you're a library person, or if you're buying, get it ready, because when you finish, you're going to want to see where these characters go next. That's my feeling. That's my advice for the day.
You are so wonderful, Carol. Thank you.
And if you like just youth characters, there's This Tender Land and Ordinary Grace. Okay. If you want to just stick with young kids, we've got something for you as well. If you don't want to age, we get it. It's fine. Kent, as always, it's so good to see you. I'm hoping we see you in person soon. It's been way too long.
We'll see how we can make that happen. All right.
We will make that happen. But until then, are we just lucky we at least get to do this virtually? I think we have to think about that.
And in the meantime, stay healthy, stay safe. It's still out there,
It's still out there, and there's which variant is coming next. You know what I mean? Who would have thought in March 2020 that we would still be doing this now? None of us.
Last July, I thought we wouldn't be here.
No.
Again.
Well, I have one friend that had the best story. She said that she thought they were going to clean the office for 2 weeks, and thus she left all her shoes behind. And when she got to go back to the office to clean out, she got her shoes back. So there are those things that we just have to sit there and think about. It wasn't just the office, it's where the shoes were kept. Look forward to seeing you. We will figure out a date as soon as it's safe to do so again.
Okay, you take care, Carol.
Great. And everybody, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks To.